I can't be at the conference this week, and I know that Julian has asked several people to do a kind of TED-type talk, trying to get it inside 15 minutes, and this is my contribution. It's really about challenges for evangelism in the Australian church. And we know that the Australian church is not doing particularly well in evangelism, so here are some of my takes as to why that would be the case. And the first is the whole shift from word to deed. You know, there's been an argument, I guess, around the Australian church and the international church about the shift from word to deed. And in the late, well, I guess 70s, 60s and 70s, especially in Melbourne, people like Athol Gill and John Uran and even Peter Corney, if you want to admit to it, were part of this whole move toward deed. The idea that the gospel is both word and deed. That the Australian influence, it seems, was moved into Lausanne, and Lausanne 1974, that first Lausanne conference, where my understanding is that people like John Smith had an enormous impact to make sure that deed became part of that statement, the Lausanne Covenant. That argument sort of bubbled along for a couple of decades, really, but I think now in Australia the argument's been won by deed. Our church does deed all the time. All churches do deed all the time. And the problem is that while we do deed, we tend to be losing our focus on word. I've actually called this, you know, the challenges for the evangelism for the Australian church. I haven't used the word mission. I haven't used the word missional. I've done that purposely because I actually think that the words mission and missional, strong words, helpful words, biblical words, are causing us to lose our focus on evangelism, which is about word, the gospel spoken and a response asked for. And the weaker we get on that, the weaker we will be in people coming to know the person of Jesus. That's come alongside of the loss of the evangelistic parachurch ministries. And as we lose evangelistic parachurch ministries, the kind of focus on evangelism is again lost as well. I mean, if you go back, I know the Sydney City Mission, before Mission Australia took it over, years and years ago actually had an evangelist on staff and had a gospel content. Groups like Youth for Christ, Scripture Union, even the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association that came to Australia with the Billy Graham Crusades, all were parachurch organisations focused on evangelism and pushed the church, as it were, to continue to do evangelism. With the shift from word to deed has also been the shift from the church into to the mission into the local church, and that has meant that what we've done is that the parachurch groups have lost their edge in the area of evangelism. Thirdly, the move away from attractional models of ministry and engagement to incarnational. Now, I know that the idea of us being as churches and as ministries incarnational is a biblical idea. Philosophically, it's right. It ought to work. We're sent into the community. It should be send and not come to us, etc., etc. And we know that that's right and true. That it seems to me, though, that the problem is as we lose the attractional model, what's happening is the incarnational model is basically not being particularly effective. I mean, that sounds like an odd thing to say because it's a biblical idea and it ought to work. And we speak about it and we talk about it, but the unfortunate outcome is it's not actually being that effective in bringing people to the person of Jesus. And it's not effective, I think, partly because the environment in which people go into is a tough environment. It's not that people don't want to share their faith. It's not that people don't want to be interested in the gospel. The problem is that in the process of doing it, they're losing their focus and they're losing their, as it were, will and confidence. And I think that crosses across the next point, which is a rise of militant new atheists. Now, we did some surveys on the militant new atheists, or the new atheists, which are militant atheists. We did some surveys on that last year. And we actually asked people, did the new atheists, have they made an impact on your thinking about faith? And the answer was no, that they hadn't. The survey seems that they haven't. But I think what they have done is that they've impacted the way our community thinks about their own positions that are an atheist position. You only have to read the Fairfax papers and read the comments to the editor, or if you go online and read an article that talks about faith or belief in any way, shape or form, and read the comments afterwards. They are strong, they are negative, and that sort of reflects a growing community attitude which says that we are not just not Christian, we are militantly against Christian faith. Now this crosses across two other issues that we're seeing in the community all the time and all of us are facing all the time. One issue is the whole issue of homosexuality and same-sex marriage and the church's view on that. And the second issue is church abuse. And with militant atheism growing, the issue around same-sex marriage and church abuse growing, it means that it's a pretty toxic environment to Joe average, committed Christian, loving Jesus, want to do the right thing, going into the community and sharing their faith. And if we lose the attractional side of the community of faith, drawing people to relationships with each other and relationships with Christ, we're going to lose a key part of our edge in being evangelistic churches and churches that are effective in gospel ministries within our community. That doesn't mean we obviously drop incarnational ministry or even stop talking about it. What it does mean is I think we need to re-engage with an attractional model of ministry as both and, rather than picking what we seem to have done and either or. I think added to all of this is a focus on postmodern thinking in evangelism. We know that postmodernity is the air the people, our community breathe. I think we're actually moving away from that, but that certainly is the air that we breathe. And what happens around postmodern evangelism, as you all know, is that the whole idea is you're sharing a message, you're sharing people's experience. The message is shared in an area of story. And the trouble is, it's almost like, join us, our story is better than your story. And at least with militant atheism, at least they're basically saying whether you're right or we're right. The trouble with postmodernity is this kind of difficult space to try and speak what we believe is biblical truth into. And if I can cross that across, this next is the impact of the seeker-sensitive church culture. Where, seeker-sensitive is a good idea, and that people would come to our churches or our groups or our ministries and feel like they're at home, and feel like that those ministries fit the culture of our community. The problem is that we feel like we need to create a warm culture. We feel like people need to be embraced and that they need to be loved and they need to feel at home. It seems to me that between that and postmodern evangelism, you've got this whole process that the gospel has become a therapeutic gospel. We're not talking about the fact that your eternity is at stake. We're not talking about the claims of Jesus. We end up saying, join us, our show is better than anybody else's. Join us, we're going to make you feel better about yourself. Join us, we've got the answer to all your problems. Now that might be partly true, but it means that the gospel message that we're bringing is not often very clear. And finally, a failure to cultivate a new generation of evangelists and apologists. And if we discuss and look around Australia and say, who are the evangelists and who are the apologists and where's the next generation and who's coming up, it's a very short list. And I think that's a very dangerous place for the church. We need to find the next generation of evangelists and we need to find the next generation of apologists. We need to find people that will support them. We need to find people that will stand behind them. We need to find a way of creating a culture around ministry and around the church where people stand up and say, yes, I'm an evangelist and that's what I want to do. And that they don't get diverted into a whole bunch of other areas, but they actually do evangelism. That we raise up the next generation of apologists that can actually stand for faith in the gospel and to preach it clearly. The Australian church is not in great shape when it comes to evangelism, and I know that anybody watching this, and you're a bright bunch, you could add things to this as well. But my hope, my passion, and my passion for any discussion that comes out of this is the idea that we ask the question, how can we be more effective in evangelistic ministry, teaching the gospel so that bring people to life-changing faith?